NASA says right now is the best time to concentrate on Venus. This aligns with the new disclosure of a possible existence on the planet, especially if you examine NASA's records from the 1960s. The space organization's call would be evident. Venus, a planet from the punishment, simultaneously became Mars' target. With such cautious naming in mind, it isn't one of the deepest planets. During the ferocious space race, the Soviet Union concentrated on spending a lot of money on Venus missions. The terrible planet displayed virtually no alternatives to death, but the Soviet Union space program did not retire until the fall of the Venera program. "We are the empire," says Neil deGrasse Tyson. "Finally, we understand why." Join us for an analysis of the declassified Venus photographs taken by the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was active in multiple ways beyond just altering international policy. Additionally, the empire sank a number of mysteries with it. The Soviets had a strong preference for secrecy, from running the world's best intelligence offices to keeping their potential contact with extraterrestrials hidden. This entailed a number of secrets from an earlier superpower. Honestly, prior to the United States of America dominating most space endeavors, the Soviet Union held the advantage. The empire had been around for a long time, conducting numerous, albeit unsuccessful and fruitless, missions in space. Its greatest and most enduring obsession was Venus. Venus, an infernal, hellish planet, was known in Russian as Venera, giving the name to the mission that took place between 1961 and 1983. Simultaneously, the United States of America focused on sending missions to the moon. This was a clever decision by the Soviets, utilizing their resources in ways that we cannot underestimate. Did the Soviet Union anticipate using Venus as a useful and outstanding military installation? Or were they possibly intending to colonize the planet immediately after searching for life there? It's extremely difficult to explain why the empire was so focused on this dreadful planet. Since the Soviets commissioned these investigative trips, they were not open and honest in their arguments or goals. The truth is, knowledge of the Venusian missions is based on unarchived and declassified evidence, and even then, it remains challenging to pinpoint the Soviet search criteria. If they discovered the secrets of Venus, they never publicly disclosed them. The Soviets never set foot on Venus just once, twice, or even 3 times. They launched 28 costly rockets to the startling planet. 13 of them entered the Venusian atmosphere, whereas 8 successfully landed. Such difficult missions cemented the Soviet space-leading position. Meanwhile, the United States of America came in close second. Satellites were more intriguing to NASA, which prioritized new setups rather than researching whether life existed on other planets. Mars's warmth arrived, and following that, the history textbooks mostly ignored Venus. They won't tell you, but the Soviet Union was the first space program to launch a probe into the atmosphere of another planet, in addition to Earth. The Soviet Union achieved numerous firsts. The first smooth landing on another planet. The first images and sounds transmitted from another planet's surface. That was correct. The Soviets had their own version of one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind before the United States. So why do we rarely learn about these milestone missions? One reason is the Soviet penchant for secrecy. Another is that in 1992, the Soviet space program was decommissioned due to the fallout of the USSR's collapse. Much of its past information was either destroyed or lost. This is precisely why we lack a clear explanation for the Soviets' actions. The decision to study Venus was likely about reducing costs more than anything else. That does not mean the space program had no hope of potential habitation on the planet. They sought inexpensive ways to explore Venus's powerful solar radiation and fundamental planetary features. Without these missions, much of what we know today about Venus would have been impossible to discover. Venus's extreme environment cannot be overstated. The planet's surface has high temperatures, capable of melting lead, and a thick atmosphere with extreme pressure, multiple times that of Earth. Many cosmologists believe that Venus is inhospitable to life. Despite these challenges, dismissing the USSR's involvement in Venusian exploration is akin to erasing history. From the Soviet perspective, Venus merited investigation, even if only to fuel the space race. At the time, planets like Mars were not exactly ideal for exploration, but the cost of Venus missions was significantly lower. The crucial difference in cost stems from distance. Venus is, on average, 40 million kilometers from Earth, whereas Mars is typically 250 million kilometers away. These distance differences translate into significant cost disparities. Even the United States, the world's largest economy, found investigating Mars difficult and expensive. Critics claim that Soviet operations were unreliable and had many technical gaps. Their spacecraft struggled with long-range cosmic distances and frequently lost contact with mission control. These technical issues likely influenced the Soviet Union's decision to pursue a shorter, more in-depth route with Venus. However, disregarding the space race in this context would be a mistake. The Venera missions were a crucial part of Soviet space dominance. At the time, the United States was struggling with its own Venus missions, facing repeated failures throughout the 1960s. The so-called Venus curse plagued NASA's attempts, creating an opportunity for the Soviets to capitalize on their rival setbacks. Both the US and the USSR wanted to win the space race. The Soviets decisively seized Venus as their strategic focus, making it a turning point in space exploration history. Despite government struggles and resource limitations, they repeatedly launched missions to Venus to maintain their position of superiority over the US. NASA, meanwhile, focused on the Moon. However, American media portrayed Venus as a dreadful planet, while Mars was seen as the future of human exploration. This distinction didn't matter to the Soviets. Their priority was to demonstrate superiority over the Americans, and in that, they succeeded. The Venera missions, though nearly omitted from contemporary history, were incredibly difficult, advanced, and ambitious. If we were to select one event that shaped the beginning of the space age, Soviet Venus exploration would be a top contender. By the 1950s, the Soviets were already experimenting with probe designs. Over the next 30 years, they continued to construct and launch interstellar spacecraft as part of the Venera program. This effort ran parallel to the Cold War, during which the Soviets focused on maximizing their resources for space exploration. Their superior heavy lifting capabilities gave them an advantage over the US. This enabled them to develop and launch more powerful rockets designed to withstand high temperatures and vast cosmic distances. The Soviets conducted investigations using both manned and unmanned spacecraft simultaneously. Behind the scenes, Soviet scientists worked tirelessly, performing calculations to chart precise paths for the Venus missions. While also running Mars programs, their primary goal remained the same: advancing space exploration with elaborate and groundbreaking instruments. Following the success of Venera 3, the Soviet Union pushed forward with even more ambitious missions to Venus. The Venera program continued throughout the late 1960s and into the 1980s, with each mission advancing humanity's understanding of this enigmatic planet. In 1967, Venera 4 became the first probe to successfully transmit data from within Venus's atmosphere. It confirmed what scientists had suspected: Venus was a hostile world, with an atmosphere composed mostly of carbon dioxide and surface pressures far greater than those on Earth. Subsequent missions, such as Venera 7 in 1970, marked even greater achievements. Venera 7 was the first spacecraft to make a soft landing on another planet and transmit data back to Earth. Though its signals were weak, they provided the first direct measurements of Venus's surface conditions. The data was alarming. Temperatures soared to nearly 475 degrees Celsius (900 degrees Fahrenheit), and the crushing atmospheric pressure was 92 times that of Earth. By the mid-1970s, the Soviets had refined their Venus exploration program. Venera 9 and 10, launched in 1975, became the first probes to return images from the surface of another planet. The grainy black-and-white photographs depicted a rocky, barren landscape under a thick, cloud-filled sky. These images stunned scientists worldwide, revealing Venus as an alien, almost apocalyptic world. The pinnacle of the Venera program came in the early 1980s with Venera 13 and 14. These probes, launched in 1981, provided the first color images from Venus's surface. They also carried advanced instruments to analyze soil composition, conduct atmospheric studies, and record sounds from the planet. The landers lasted just over an hour before succumbing to Venus's extreme conditions, but in that short time, they transmitted invaluable data. Despite the incredible success of the Venera program, the Soviet Union eventually shifted its focus away from Venus. The high costs, coupled with the realization that Venus was far too hostile for human exploration, led to the program's decline. By the late 1980s, Soviet interest in planetary exploration had waned, and the dissolution of the USSR in 1991 effectively ended their ambitions. Today, Venus remains a subject of fascination for scientists. NASA, along with other space agencies, has renewed interest in studying the planet, particularly in the search for signs of past or present life. However, the legacy of the Venera missions remains a testament to the Soviet Union's pioneering efforts in space exploration. For decades, these missions were overshadowed by American achievements such as the Apollo moon landings. Yet, the Soviets were the first to reach Venus, land on its surface, and send back images and data that fundamentally changed our understanding of the planet. Their efforts, though often overlooked, represent one of the most significant chapters in the history of space exploration. As humanity prepares for future missions to Venus, we must acknowledge the groundbreaking work of the Soviet space program. Without their early efforts, our knowledge of Venus, and perhaps even the broader universe, would be far less advanced than it is today. The increased level of competition between the two superpowers rather than the United States missions, which were filled with the Soviet Union's failures and stalemates, allowed the Soviet space program to continue advancing. Despite the program's sluggish growth, the Soviet Union was successful in sending probes to investigate the environment of Venus. The most important problem with this approach was its limited design potential. The Soviets quickly revised their plan, addressed key issues, and introduced the most recent Venera program rockets in the 1970s. Their capacity for innovation allowed them to achieve the initial dual-mission launch with Venera 4 and Venera 5. The majority of historians agree that this was the most fascinating decade in the history of space exploration. The United States attempted similar plans for launch. However, why did the Soviet agency choose dual missions to Venus? To comprehend this, one must acknowledge that advanced technology is required for space travel, as well as sophisticated equipment for gathering the highest level of evidence and data. The first spacecraft was launched to explore the surface of the planet. Exactly what happened with Venera 4? The launch was successful, and the spacecraft entered the Venusian atmosphere. The Soviet program effectively continued utilizing Venera 5. This wasn't just another instance of space exploration. The second spacecraft's launch was specifically designed to collect unique information about the planet. The Soviets aimed to overcome obstacles such as extreme temperatures, atmospheric pressure, and radiation on Venus. Fortunately, they did not have to wait long for their responses. By the mid-1970s, the Soviet program had entered its most advanced stage. Everything the USSR had achieved up until that point was centered on research and development, ensuring that their technologies and designs were optimized. However, it was also about perfecting the procedures and workings of interstellar travel. In the second decade of the Venera missions, the Soviet Union aimed to conduct the most successful exploratory missions. The fascinating beginning of this era was Venera 7, the 11th Soviet investigation. When it entered Venus' atmosphere, it became the first spacecraft to transmit information from another planet. At this point, high planetary densities, extreme temperatures, and surface pressure were already recorded. The Soviets also aimed to capture Venusian sounds. The program achieved another milestone with Venera 13, which had surpassed all previous planetary explorations by the mid-1980s. This spacecraft was the first to take color panoramic photographs of Venus' surface. Around the same time, the Soviet program launched Venera 14 to collect comparable data. As one of the first nations to locate and identify Venusian geological features, the Soviet Union Space Agency expanded its goals. The Venera program was a planned mission for Venus, involving a collaboration between Roscosmos and NASA. The mission aimed to study Venus' atmosphere, surface, and geological history and to search for evidence of past or ongoing habitability. It was expected to debut in the late 2020s or early 2030s. The mission would include a lander, an orbiter, and possibly an inflatable probe to investigate the planet's environment. Beyond technological advancements, the Venera missions had a significant impact on global space exploration. These missions, initiated during the height of the Cold War, represented humanity's highest level of ingenuity and perseverance in space exploration. Despite the numerous difficulties and challenges, the Soviets remained committed to uncovering Venus mysteries. Long regarded as hostile and uninhabitable, Venus posed extreme challenges. One of the most essential features of the Venera missions was that they were the first to use mechanical probes to study planetary climates and surfaces. These missions laid the groundwork for future exploration beyond Earth's neighborhood and significantly contributed to our understanding of planetary science. The information gathered by the Venera spacecraft provided valuable insights into Venus' environment, including its crushingly hot temperatures, toxic atmosphere, and extreme pressure dominated by carbon dioxide. Furthermore, the technological advancements enabled by the Venera program had far-reaching implications for space exploration in general. The development of heat-resistant materials, effective communication systems, and advanced landing methods were major achievements that influenced subsequent planetary missions, such as those to Mars and beyond. The lessons learned from the Venera missions continue to shape modern spacecraft design and operational strategies. Beyond their technological and scientific significance, these missions also had political and social consequences during the space race. They symbolized the superpower rivalry for space dominance. For the Soviet Union, the Venera missions were about more than scientific advancement. They were also a demonstration of technological expertise and ideological superiority over the United States. The international community closely observed every mission and recognized their importance in advancing human understanding of the solar system. A major milestone was achieved in 1970 when Venera 7 successfully landed on Venus, becoming the first spacecraft to transmit data from the surface of another planet. This accomplishment highlighted the Soviet Union's capability to overcome Venus' harsh conditions. The Venera spacecraft carried scientific instruments and cameras that captured the first close-up images of Venus' surface. These images revealed a rough terrain dominated by volcanic and rocky plains, providing researchers with valuable geological data about the planet's history and development. Later missions, such as Venera 13 and Venera 14, enhanced our understanding of Venus' surface morphology and composition. Despite their successes, the Venera missions also faced significant setbacks and challenges. Some missions failed due to technical malfunctions or the extreme conditions of Venus. With surface temperatures exceeding 450 degrees Celsius (842 degrees Fahrenheit) and corrosive sulfuric acid clouds, Venus posed a severe challenge for spacecraft engineering, design, and operation. However, the perseverance and dedication of Soviet engineers and scientists in the Venera program paved the way for future missions to Venus and other celestial bodies. The legacy of the Venera missions continues to influence modern space exploration efforts worldwide. Agencies such as NASA and Roscosmos are preparing future missions, such as the Vityaz mission, to build upon the achievements of Venera. The Vityaz mission aims to send advanced instruments to study Venus' atmosphere, geology, and potential signs of past or present habitability. This represents a collaborative international effort to unlock the remaining mysteries of Earth's planetary neighbor and expand our understanding of conditions that may support life beyond Earth.